will control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today I'm covering a series which was actually a kind of sequel series to Tales from the Crypt. And it did air a year after Tales of the Crypt ended, and it was deliberately sort of intended to be a sequel to Tales from the Crypt. But instead of focusing on horror, it was focused more on science fiction. The series is called Perversions of Science. It doesn't seem to be a well-known series. It was commissioned by HBO, and it only lasted for 10 episodes. It lasted a 10-episode run and was not renewed. And as I say, it was conceived as a kind of sci-fi version of Tales from the Crypt. It was also based on DC Comics, particularly Weird Science, the run of called Weird Science, but also it borrowed some episodes and stories from Weird Fantasy and the Incredible Science Fiction comic book series. So it was from all over the place. And given its sort of founding fathers, and they include, get this for some of the executive producers, Richard Donner, Walter Hill, Joel Silver, Robert Zemeckis. It had some weight behind it, I would say, and in fact this first episode, which I'm going to be discussing, was directed by Walter Hill. So there is that. Theme music directed by Danny Elfman. It's very distinctively Danny Elfman, the closing music. And interestingly, some of the incidental and opening music of this episode I'm going to be talking about was done by Mark Snow, who was famous for The X-Files. So there's some pedigree. Now, this particular episode is a bit of a mind bender. Let's put it that way. Directed, as I say, by Walter Hill. It was called Dream of Doom, and apparently derived from issue 12 of Weird Science, the first story in it. And interestingly written by David Goyer, who is a long-time collaborator of Christopher Nolan. I believe he wrote some or all of the Dark Knight trilogy, for example. First aired, or its original air date, was the 7th of June 1997. And frankly, it's mind-bending. Keith Carradine is the main actor in it, who plays a professor who keeps thinking he's not waking up or he's already in a dream, and it starts with him going to a psychiatrist, expressing this, and then kind of waking up and finding himself another. And in fact, this is an entire catalogue of different dreams with the same actors playing different characters. For example, his wife swaps at one point. He's got a wife, and she will swap for another actress who's in another scene as a different character, and then swap back again. And his reality keeps changing. For example, he does stress that they are childless, and in another scene, his wife's got a child. And so on. It keeps rotating and rotating and rotating and getting deeper and deeper. There is a slight twist at the end to change it slightly, but there's a bit. As I say, Keith Carradine is the main actor, but it also stars Lolita Davidovich as his sort of wife, or one of the significant females in his dreaming process, and also stars Adam Arkin. The actor Adam Arkin is. Depending on what stream it is, sometimes he's a colleague, sometimes he's a guy that's after him because he calls him a sort of plagiarist of other people's work, and he'll get removed from his tenureship. And there's also an actress in it called Gretchen Palmer, who's been in a few things too. And as I say, they kind of swap roles. They kind of mutate every sort of level he goes through. It falls through. Interestingly, the film this is most like is probably Inception. Now, I've already mentioned David Goyer was the writer of this. David Goyer works quite closely with Christopher Nolan. He apparently didn't write Inception. Christopher Nolan came out with his story himself, but it's remarkably similar to kind of what's going on in here. Now, as I say, this was written in 1997, so you can kind of associate with a whole slew of movies before 1997 and after about sort of dreams within dreams and stuff like that. For example, some of the stuff going on around with Brazil, which goes back to 85. Some of it is kind of a bit Matrix, which is 2 years after. Inception is probably the most similar, but there's various others where people are having dreams and dreams within dreams. For example, American Werewolf in London plays that trick very briefly, and that's what's going on. So it's quite a disconcerting piece, quite well directed. The music's pretty good, but it's not really got a plot. Really, we're just getting to understand this character. And through these weird dreams he keeps having, we're kind of getting to understand his fears, his most irrational fears, and possibly his most precious hopes as well. Other than that, there's not much to say. I quite enjoyed it. It worked for me, but it was kind of a weird mess. The only thing I will say is the intro mechanism is super strange. Basically, it's a CGI robot, a female robot who's clearly a female robot. She's kind of got a naked form, pretty much, and she's quite pneumatic too. And to get this, to introduce the story, she sort of talks about it in a very innuendo-heavy way, and eventually presses her right nipple, and part of her breast opens, and we kind of see into this universe, which then emerges into the story. That's weird, right? That's weird. And in addition, the intro sort of sequence is also a family watching TV, and the kid is eating popcorn and drops a piece, and we zoom into the popcorn, and we kind of get into the subatomic level, and then we see the atoms of planets, and then it's basically an entire universe is in a bit of popcorn kind of premise, which, is a kind of 60s thing. It also was a thing used in the Jim Carrey version of The Grinch, if I remember rightly. In that case, it was a snowflake, zooming into a snowflake and seeing the universe as it was. But in this one, it's a popcorn. So there's some odd stuff going on. And the robot thing really doesn't work. It just feels weird. And she's got a very sort of sexualized voice as well as look, and the content, the things she says, the sort of suggestive things she says. But yeah, Dream of Doom, interesting first entry. And apparently some of the other ones are very considered quite highly. But overall, this was a big fail, and it seems to be an anthology series. No one talks about it. You may have heard of it, but I got a feeling that most people listening to this will not have heard of Perversions of Science. It's a weird title too. I mean, Weird Science seems a better name, but I guess there is a film called Weird Science from the 80s, and they did want to get it confused. So yeah, okay, so they went with Perversions of Science. So yeah, very odd. So, yes, I would recommend giving this a try if you can find it anywhere. I think I found it on YouTube. So have a search on YouTube, see what you can find, and give it a bit of a go, I would suggest. So, yeah, that's me on Perversions of Science. So, bye from me, and may I ask before I go, is anybody out there?
I'm not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to